One thing is clear, none of what Trump is doing is making Illinois safer.
How many of these arrests, 500 people, how many were violent criminals?
Honestly, hundreds. So out of, as of this morning, we're over 550 arrests. And what ICE is doing at Operation Midway Blitz is we are focusing on those criminal aliens that have been released from sanctuary jurisdictions. And those are the worst of the worst that we're out there looking for.
So we have other breaking news that we're following this afternoon. A high-ranking member of a street gang is charged with putting a hit out on a senior law enforcement official involved with Operation Midway Blitz.
So here we go again with the insurrectionist Democrats, and it's the same cycle every single time, where Democrats incite violence against ICE, then deny that it's even happening, much less use their local law enforcement to do something about it, and then call Donald Trump the bad guy when he responds and tries to curb the violence, right? He's an authoritarian, blah, blah, blah. And I hope by now you're realizing that this entire crisis that they're claiming it is entirely manufactured and created by the Democrat Party. Because dating back years, of course, they're the ones who allowed Joe Biden to open the border to 10 million illegals. Then they slander the immigration agents in the new government who are doing something about that. And of course, after their repeated slander creates open violence against ICE, they refuse to do anything about the violence. They just stand there and watch, and again, create and manufacture the crisis, then claim Donald Trump is doing a fascist takeover when he sends in federal troops or federal agents, National Guard, you basically name it. And it's of course like, it really begs the question, okay, have you tried simply not being a sanctuary city? Have you considered the fact that maybe Trump would not have to go in and send troops into your city if you would simply enforce the law? But oh, wait a minute, right? You're not doing that. But of course, as I said, the entire thing is basically staged like that by their party on purpose. That said, in today's video, I want to bring you yet more evidence of this. We have more arrests coming out of the city of Chicago with attempted violence towards ICE. It turns out now it's being led even by the Latin American cartels, which should not be all that surprising. We know there's a very close union between not just Democrats and Antifa, but also Democrats in the cartel. It's been years now where they're constantly defending MS-13, Tren de Aragua, basically every chance that they get, as well as the Democrat response to all of it, right? Because we're seeing actual violence, actual arrests being made over terroristic threats and all those things. And of course, as I've been saying, what are Democrats responding with? No, let's not talk about the violence, but have you seen Donald Trump, deploying the National Guard? Hopefully, by the way, that helps you understand a lot of the longtime history of the left, right? How they've basically staged or manufactured these social crises and then called the right wing the bad guy for simply reacting to it. But furthermore, what is now happening with the National Guard, because apparently the state of Texas, after the courts basically said to Trump, hey, you can't deploy National Guard to stop civil unrest, Governor Greg Abbott basically said to the court, okay, but you never said I can. And so now Texas National Guard troops, ladies and gentlemen, have arrived in the state of Illinois. And of course, needless to say, the liberals, MSNBC, CNN hosts, and Democrats themselves are absolutely fuming and panicking about this. We'll get into all those details. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work and ensure that we can keep bringing you these videos. And that said, in the latest news out of the Democrat voter base, apparently just this week, federal officials arrested a Latin Kings cartel gang leader who was offering $10,000 to basically putting a bounty on the head, right? Calling a hit on the Border Patrol Chief Gregory Bovino, which again should not be all that surprising because we know there is a massively stoked trend of violence against ICE. Democrats keep on claiming this is not real. Gavin Newsom says, hey, ICE, what do you have to be afraid of? Well, it's a lot like this stuff right here. Needless to say.
There's a bounty that was released. Juan Espinoza Martinez, they got his screenshot off his Snapchat because he thought it was just going to disappear. They got him in custody now, but he was releasing that he was willing to pay, and he works for the cartel, of course, $2K on info on these agents, and then $10K if you take them down. Now, what he means by taking them down is assassinating them.
Yeah, you heard the governor talk about Greg Bovino. If you don't know who he is, he's the chief patrol agent. And DHS is saying that this guy who you're talking about, Lawrence, allegedly placed a bounty on the commander-at-large of the Border Patrol chief, and that's Gregory Bovino. He was on with Sean last night talking about this issue. He says that this guy, this 37-year-old Chicago resident, Juan Espinozo Martinez, was charged with murder for hire. He was arrested yesterday. He is a ranking member of the Latin Kings, which is a gang known for violent crimes and drug trafficking across Chicago. He's from Mexico. He came to the United States.
Actually, they're a group of teenagers and family people. Would like to give the Democrat revising and correction to that. So
it's illegally. And yes, on Snapchat, he was offering thousands of dollars if you take down Bovino. And he put a picture of Bovino on there.
Right, there you go. And by the way, who are the thugs? According to the governor, the thugs are the ones wearing bulletproof vests right there. And the guy in the middle, Latin Kings, I guess the governor's fine with that because these guys are running wild throughout Chicago, are really thriving for the last 20 years, but they don't want any help. Matt Scarpino says this. Targeting senior federal officers is a brazen and direct assault on the rule of law, and HSI will remain persistent, dismantling violent gangs like the Latin Kings that threaten public safety.
So that's actually really interesting. Because it turns out that the anti-ICE violence and violent rhetoric isn't just coming from Democrats or far-left Antifa members. It's also coming from the Latin American drug cartels. So you mean to tell me there's something of an overlap there, right? There's an unholy trinity, I guess some would call it, between the Democrat Party, the violent revolutionary left, and the Latin American drug cartels? It's almost like the Democrat constituency fully consists of, and of course the people they fight hardest for are their own voters, which include people like illegal aliens, violent criminals, international narco and arms traffickers, all sorts of these types of people. We know exactly what it is, right? And then of course when Border Patrol or ICE goes in and deports people like this, they of course scream that you're removing the valuable immigrants from our communities that are working the essential jobs we need for our economy. What are those essential jobs exactly, right? I don't know, drug dealing? Robbing stores, carjacking people? Well, that's the world Democrats ultimately want us to live in, so that should not be all that surprising. But needless to say, let's take a wild guess, guys. Are you going to see a single Democrat politician acknowledging this whatsoever? That, hey, the type of stuff you're stoking is not just causing Antifa violence, it's also just leading the cartel. Like, you guys are just aiding and helping and abetting the cartel at this point. No, absolutely not. But ladies and gentlemen, it turns out it goes deeper than this. Because over this weekend, we also saw, many different cases of anti-ICE violence, particularly in Chicago, whether it was multiple cases of them chasing around ICE, like high-speed chases in vehicles, which, needless to say, is a felony and majorly against the law, or the one where they boxed in ICE and then the woman tried to shoot at them, and then ICE had to shoot back and all this stuff, which JB Pritzker, by the way, to this very day claims is propaganda, like he's just denying that ever happened. And that said, we also just got news today, as JB Pritzker is going on and, talking about whatever he's doing here, that 3 Venezuelan illegal aliens that are suspected Tren de Aragua gang members, oh, by the way, valuable coalition of the DNC, I'm sure in 2028, as they put all the coalitions up there, the delegates from each state, you're going to see in the roll call for their, convention. Tren de Aragua, how do you vote? Gavin Newsom, yeah! MS-13, how do you vote? That's what's going to happen. Someone should make an AI parody video of that, honestly. But that said, these 3 Tren de Aragua, being harbored by JB Pritzker's sanctuary city policies, just got arrested after traveling into Indiana and robbing a bank. So here we go again with the Democrats, highly upstanding members of society, add bank robbers, ladies and gentlemen, to the Democrat coalition that JB Pritzker finds it very necessary to go out and ruthlessly defend and protect.
Venezuelan illegal immigrants living in Chicago were caught stealing from an ATM in Posey County. Now, that's according to Sheriff Tom Latham. He says they were notified of an ATM alarm at Crane Credit Union on St. Wendell, Cynthiana Road early this morning. Deputies say a drone helped find 21-year-old Marcos Sanchez. Officials say they then stopped a suspect vehicle. Inside was 24-year-old Deniker Bracco and 25-year-old Edison Navarro. Deputies say evidence of theft was found inside the vehicle. All are in the Posey County Jail.
Yeah, are we even surprised at this point? Ladies and gentlemen, simply another byproduct of JB Pritzker's sanctuary city policies, by the way, combined with the soft on crime policies of Brandon Johnson. You know, they keep on telling us Chicago's the safest place anywhere in the world. Everything in our city is perfectly fine. And, well, needless to say, we obviously know that's not the case. Of course, another great, I will say, irony of this is that in the process of what ICE is currently doing in Chicago, they're actually taking record numbers of illegal guns off the streets because, keep in mind, illegal aliens are not permitted to own firearms, considering the Second Amendment right only applies constitutionally to American citizens. Which is why the very same guy who the cartel was trying to assassinate here, Greg Bovino, the Border Patrol agent in charge in Chicago, just recently revealed they've seized more illegal guns in Chicago than in Los Angeles in 1 month than over 4 months in LA. Take a listen.
Fired several shots striking an individual. That individual, as you said, was armed with a semi-automatic weapon. So that was 2 from a couple of days ago. Today, more of the same. Another semi-automatic weapon in the car of an individual that tried to box in a Border Patrol agent. Sean, we've seen more weapons here in Chicago in a month than we did in Los Angeles over a 4-month period. Definitely something going on here in Chicago.
So wait a minute, this is genuinely interesting. You might be asking to yourself, how is it that the party of gun control is suddenly mad about legitimate gun control, right? Taking guns away from people who are not actually constitutionally even allowed to have them. Of course, the answer is very simple. There's a reason why the Democrats are opposed to this gun control currently going on. And hopefully you're aware of this by now. But the Democrats don't want to just seize everyone's guns. No, they particularly want to disarm the normal law-abiding Americans. Make no mistake, Democrats are perfectly fine with their people or the people they want to be having guns. So they're perfectly fine with policies that, for instance, allow all of the Tren de Aragua illegal alien violent gang member criminals to be having guns. Again, Democrats want those people to have guns. They're perfectly fine, for instance, with the Tyler Robinsons and Antifas of the world having those weapons. It's just you, right? And I think, you can kind of draw the logical conclusions as to why they would craft a policy essentially allowing for their paramilitary forces, talking about the Democrat Party, out in the streets to be armed, but of course, everyone else who wants out a Second Amendment, that of course not applying there. But that said, there you just have yet another example of how effective everything is going. And in response to all of this, we of course have JB Pritzker, ladies and gentlemen. While of course, right, massive violence against ICE going on, a lot of chaos, right? ICE is seizing a ton of guns. So you mean to tell me, the situation is actually legitimately dangerous? He is instead going on TV to now claim that President Trump will use the military. This is what the National Guard's really about, to rig the elections like in Russia and Nazi Germany. He believes that's the main takeaway. And of course, this has been the narrative. Trump is sending the National Guard in response to record threats and violence against ICE. This is an authoritarian move. Okay. We have some thoughts. First, take a listen.
At them, but they think they can get people used to the idea. And next year, I fear that what they're going to do is deploy these folks eventually to polling places and say they're protecting the vote. Donald Trump knows that without shenanigans and without these breaches of the Constitution, that he's going to lose the Congress. And if he loses, he's going to immediately, in the aftermath of the election, do what he said he might do in 2020, which is use the military to confiscate the ballot boxes and count the votes, claiming that there's fraud. Remember, he's called up all 50 states' election data to the Department of Justice because they want to review all 50 states for fraud. And they won't tell you exactly what they're going to do, but I fear that these are all connected. And this militarization, even without National Guard or military troops on the ground, you're seeing ICE act like a militaristic organization. You're seeing CBP act like it.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I could barely understand the point that schizophrenic JB Pritzker is trying to make there. I think it basically comes down to, if Donald Trump deports illegal aliens from this country, he may win the elections, which is Pretty strange point to be making, but you know what? Okay, I get it. But I once again go back to the central question here of, okay, if you really think it's that bad, if you think Trump is looking for the excuse to militarize our cities and do martial law, have you tried not giving him that reason instead of constantly provoking him, right? Like, as I've been trying to tell people, the right wing does not have a genuine fantasy of militarizing cities and martial law and all this stuff. What it's about is that, well, when you have a situation where there's just rampant crime and violence and unrest and basically an insurrection going on in the streets sponsored by the Democrat politicians, then, like, at a certain point, like, you have to go in there and take order if the local politicians refuse. We would very much like for the local politicians to, of course, you know, be working in coordination and cooperation instead of the opposite. But here's the thing. Pritzker's not that stupid. He's pretty stupid, but not that stupid. He knows what he is doing is trying to provoke Trump into sending the National Guard or federalizing the city. That's exactly why he turns a total blind eye to violence. Okay, he tells his police department to stand down, as we've covered. He pretends it's all fake. Why? Because the Democrats, the liberals in this country, actually want to create the scene of Trump sending in, for instance, National Guard troops into a city, so that way they can sit there and scream, see, it's an authoritarian takeover. But as I said, it's an entire situation they set up and staged and created so that, as they've done many times in history, they can stand there after they keep provoking law enforcement and say things like, oh, you know, they're sending the military after us. They're tear gassing peaceful protesters, even though 2 seconds before the video, we were not being peaceful and all this garbage. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what it is really about. Make no mistake, JB Pritzker doesn't actually think that the National Guard are going to, like, stop the midterms or something, but he does believe in his eyes that, well, the image, the optics of military going into cities might look bad for Trump. That said, you know, at the same time, I'm not sure if he's correct about that assessment. I think, as usual, when it comes to crime, immigration, all these issues, Democrats vastly underestimate how many Americans actually do want to live in an orderly society. But just understand, right, that is exactly the narrative that they're trying to paint here with all of this. Now, that said, let us talk about the back and forth legal battle over this National Guard issue. Because recently we did cover how Trump basically started using the California National Guard in Oregon because the woke judge said you can't use the Oregon National Guard without the governor's permission. Now, ever since, that judge has stepped in and said, you're, you know, still violating my order. You can't use any National Guard in Portland, is what they're currently telling the Trump administration. And similar situation basically happening here in Chicago. That is exactly why the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, has basically said again to these ridiculous judges who, of course, support insurrection on our streets that, hey, if you're not going to allow Trump to send the National Guard to these places, well, then, Mr. Judge, you never said that I couldn't do it, and that is exactly why he is currently now sending Texas National Guard to the state of Illinois. Take a listen.
Now we have these local states that are refusing to enforce the law, and we have chaos. Know this, and that is the president has the constitutional responsibility to enforce the laws of the United States, and those laws include the immigration laws. And the president has the authority to call up National Guard to assist in enforcing those laws. And that's exactly what the president is doing and what Texas is doing. We're assisting the president in that cause. I want you to know just moments ago, our National Guard, our elite National Guard in the state of Texas, began their deployment as they were loading on planes in Texas, boarding for flights to parts of the country where they will be able to safeguard ICE officials and other federal officials as they try to enforce the laws of the United States of America.
Well, there you go, right? If the judges want to tell Trump, despite being commander-in-chief, that he cannot mobilize a state's National Guard without the governor's permission, then now we have the governor's permission. It's simply the governor of the state of Texas. Hey, judges, you want to play stupid games? We can do that too, right? You want to constantly sit here and be these activists who are going to aid and sponsor the insurrection happening on our streets and, you know, just try to use these temporary injunctions and abuse them to delay any decision or action being allowed by the Trump administration, then we're going to use our governors back against you. Now, that said, you can immediately see the left-wing reaction to all of this. For instance, from Chuck Todd, now I believe like a CNN contributor. He used to be on MSNBC, saying, and I quote, "I don't think folks realize how surreal this is. The fact that the Texas governor refuses to respect another state's right should alarm Texas. Imagine the outcry from Abbott himself if it was Texas on the receiving end of unwanted National Guard from Illinois." First of all, I'd like to point out, the National Guard are being sent to safeguard ICE facilities from violent rioters, okay? They're not patrolling the streets of Chicago. They're staying on federal property, number one. But secondly, more importantly here, now, I know that we all have political amnesia, and it's been about a month or two since we've talked about redistricting, but I just want to casually remind people, was it not JB Pritzker directly in the state of Illinois who were sheltering the rogue Texas Democrat lawmakers, who, by the way, were in violation of Texas law by fleeing the state to deny a quorum in order for that redistricting vote to happen? Yeah, I remember that. I also remember how the Illinois police said they would not allow the Texas State Guard or state troopers to go in and enforce the laws of their own state. In other words, Illinois would not be extraditing those Democrats back to Texas. So, you want to say, oh, you're opening up a can of worms here. Yeah, who did that, huh? Who started this conflict between the states, Pritzker? Now you're crying the victim. Now Texas can't do that. Oh. Just saying, right? Of course, both Pritzker and Governor Gavin Newsom are now threatening that they're going to pull from the National Governors Association if it won't condemn the Trump deployments, right? Newsom, for instance, saying, quote, "If the National Governors Association cannot stand against states literally invading one another, count me out." And it's like, oh no, right? We're so scared, guys. Pritzker and Newsom are leaving the Governors Association. Whatever will we do? But of course, to all of the unhappy Democrats, ladies and gentlemen, I have a very simple solution to this entire problem. It's called, have you tried enforcing your own law? Right? Have you tried actually taking control and order of the situation so that way other people don't have to come in, act like they're parenting a baby basically, and do it for you? Have you tried saying to the violent left-wing rioters, criminals, and terrorists who are constantly antagonizing ICE and even trying to do worse than that every single week, hey, we're going to arrest you. Hey, that type of violence will not be tolerated on our streets? The party who supposedly condemns political violence, by the way. Because after all, if you're really that scared of Trump federalizing the city or Greg Abbott sending his National Guard, and you genuinely think it's a bad thing, not that you're trying to purposely provoke it for a political stunt, which you obviously are, then that would seem like the most obvious solution, is it not? The most obvious solution is to say, okay, let me clean up my situation, get control, so that way at least the attention can be on someone else. And even if I think the Trump administration are these big evil fascists, don't give them a reason, right? Try to look good for the camera at least, so that way, you can maybe hope it doesn't happen to you. But of course, again, these people don't genuinely believe there's a fascist takeover or something happening. They want to create it. They want to bring it upon themselves so that way it can be used as propaganda, I suppose, nationwide. But all of that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.